Hi, welcome to this session on Amplify your web and mobile application development. I'm Scott Scovell from Servo. I'm the Cloud Native Practice Lead for Servo Australia, and Servo have a presence in both Sydney and in Melbourne. This session is going to quickly run through a couple of slides just introducing the AWS Amplify framework before we go into a demonstration on how we might use this Amplify framework in a real-world multi-developer environment. The AWS Amplify framework is an opinionated framework targeting the AWS platform. What that means is you're going to be led through a series of prompts in the CLI on how to set up some standard architecture for each of the different categories that you're looking to choose from, whether it be APIs, whether it be storage, whether it be authentication. Now, what that does is accelerate our web and application development lifecycle, but we're also a little bit constrained as well on how we would be doing things. So there's always trade-offs. Having said that, though, there are plenty of escape hatches built into the framework that allow us to go off and do some more customization around these particular areas. The AWS Amplify framework is made up of three key areas. One is the framework itself, which is a series of libraries and UI components built in a number of different languages, targeting web and mobile platform. There is the Amplify CLI, which is a CLI tool that we can use to manage the front end and the back end lifecycle of our applications. And then there's the Amplify console, which is a set of cloud services that provides managed CI/CD and application hosting. Looking at the Amplify framework in a little bit more detail, I mentioned before, it's a framework library used to build web and mobile user experiences. It supports a number of front-end frameworks as well as mobile frameworks, as you can see there, iOS, Android, for cross-platform, Flutter, React Native, Ionic. And then on the web, we've got the major JavaScript front-end frameworks, Angular, React, and Vue. That gives us a bunch of drop-in libraries around authentication, analytics, GraphQL, some storage that we can use to accelerate our application development. Looking at those categories in a little bit more detail, as you can see around analytics, at the back end, it leverages Amazon Pinpoint to provide that user engagement experience as well. On the API category, we can choose between GraphQL or REST, and that essentially provisions AppSync or API gateway resources in our backend. The auth category or authentication category, it uses a consumer-based identity service, Cognito, and we can use Cognito user pools or federated identities, as well as social identity providers such as Google and Facebook and those sorts of things. On the data storage category, that provides us some online-offline data storage on the device and allows automatic syncing of those, caching, those sorts of services. In the function category, this is where we use functions as a service, and on the back end that provisions Lambda services for us, as well as API gateway endpoints that we can access those functions. Through interactions, we can build conversational interfaces that leverage Amazon Lex at the back end. We also got UI components that we can drop in to provide instant interfaces for those major languages. In predictions, there's a whole bunch of back-end Amazon services that we can leverage for image recognition, for language translation, one into the other, voice to text and text to voice, etc. On the pub sub, we can leverage the AWS IoT high volume eventing service. On the publish notifications, we can again use iOS and Android services through Pinpoint. Storage, S3, backend storage, and DynamoDB. So it provides a whole bunch of libraries that makes accessing those two services a match. And lastly, around augmented reality and virtual reality, so using the Amazon Sumerian service as well, that makes that available. The Amplify CLI is the workhorse of the framework, so this is where you use to bootstrap your project using Amplify Init. You'll use things like Amplify Add, and the category went through, such as Amplify Add Storage, Amplify Add API. We can do local mocking of those services before we push them into our backend environments. In order to manage those environments, we use things like Amplify Environment Add that can add a number of backend environments. And then using Amplify Environment Checkout and Amplify Environment Pull, we can manage the lifecycle of those environments. And as we promote branches from one to the other, we can use those to make sure that we've checked out the latest backend changes as well as our front-end applications in the branches. We've got lifecycle management commands as well through Amplify Status, Publish, and of course Delete, where we can very quickly just tear down all those resources. So that's very good for proof of concepts and pilots, those sorts of things. The Amplify console is those cloud services I mentioned that provides continuous integration and deployment services that we can hook up to our Git repositories and do automated testing and deployments into our backend environments. It's got support for all major Git providers, support multiple environments, and using the tools of the Amplify console, we can do a number of different Git-based workflow strategies such as feature branch strategies and Git flow. We can bring custom domains into our applications very easily and extremely easily if we're going to use the Route 53 and Amazon Certificate Manager services as well. Globally available service. The hosting is out on Amazon CloudFront, so edge devices with points of presence very close to all your customers across the globe. It also allows us to do atomic deployments. So should something be introduced into the environment that may break it or has a bug, we can always roll back at a click of a button or a call of an API to restore that environment back to the previous state. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of support for a number of different workflows that your development team might be practicing, such as feature branch workflows, Git flow-based workflows, and using the CLI, we can manage the lifecycle of our application in very familiar Git conventions, such as checkout and merge. Following those patterns that you see here, we can promote our application through development, test, and prod, familiar to your developers. If we're not going to use the CLI, we can always use the cloud services, as I mentioned, with those managed CI/CD pipelines to help us create those environments automatically as we create those branches in our backend Git repository. The Amplify console service will auto-detect changes in the Git repository and create those environments automatically for us. And we've got some features based around that, such as auto detection of when those branches are deleted. They can tear down those environments, and also through those domain certificates, provide subdomain certificate endpoints for those environments on the fly as well. So let's move into our demo. The demo is going to be centered around how do we put together real-world multi-developer team workflows using Amplify. Jump into the demo and look at how that might be used in a production scenario. Okay, so let's go on to the demo. In this demo, our goal is to set up our project for team development with the Amplify CLI and the Amplify console. We'll use a feature branch workflow within our team, and we'll set up test and production environments with fully managed CI/CD pipelines to build, test, and deploy our code. And hopefully, we'll see how our developers can use this workflow within their toolchain. So let's get started. We have a React.js application, HTML and Bootstrap, sort of stuff. So let's have a look at that just to get that up and running. It's a boilerplate starting point for our code, and our two developers will then add features into this application. The two features will be an authentication feature, so that we require people to sign in and sign up to our application with full password self-service, such as forgot password, MFA challenges, those sorts of things as well. And the second feature will be image recognition. So we can identify any food in the world, as Jin Yang would say. So great, right, that's our project. We've got our React app. We have our master branch. Let's connect it to our Git repo. So I've created a repository up here. So let's go and add that to our repository. Let's now bootstrap our Amplify application. So with any new project, we start with Amplify init. And what we'll do is we'll go through the prompts and we will create our Amplify backend services in the cloud. So yes, what's the name for this environment? We're going to start with our production environment, being on master. So we have our Visual Studio Code. It's worked out that it's a JavaScript app and it's using Angular. And we'll just accept the defaults here for the setup of the build environment. And AWS is the cloud provider. And it'll ask us now for the credentials to use. So we've got a profile with our API keys, and we'll set that up, and it'll go away now and just bootstrap that Amplify console application for us. Completed successfully. We'll quickly just jump over to our Amplify console, and you can see in our Amplify console, a new application has just been created for us, and a backend environment prod has been created. So what we'll do now is just commit those changes, and we will now go and create our development branch as well. So let's do that. Let's go create a new branch, call it dev. And what we'll do is we will create our Amplify backend environment that meets our dev. So we'll go Amplify environment add. Do you want to use an existing environment? No, we want to create a new one. What's the name of the environment? It's going to be dev. Thanks. Yes, we're going to use AWS, and it'll go away now and provision that environment for us after I choose the profile. Okay, that is complete. Let's just have a quick look at our environments now. So Amplify environment, list our environments, and you can see we have a production and a development environment. So let's check that in now. We've done Amplify environment. We've added our dev. All right, so let's push that up. So we have now created our branches. We've created our backend environments. And if we go back to our application, we'll just do a quick refresh. We can see now that we have two backend environments. We have a dev and we have a prod. What we are going to do now is just connect our GitHub repository so that we match our branches to our environments and set up our managed CI/CD pipeline. So what we'll do now is we'll connect our branch. So we'll choose GitHub. We'll go connect branch. Now I'm already logged into GitHub, so let's choose the application. Let's choose the branch. We'll start with master. So we've connected the branch. Now let's associate that with a backend environment.
So we'll choose production and we'll select a role. So let's save and deploy there and complete connecting our master branch to our production backend environment. So there we can see now in 2 seconds, that should kick off a build on our managed CI/CD pipeline and then go and deploy our boilerplate React app that we just saw into our production environment. So while that's happening, let's connect the dev branch into a dev backend environment. And that's completed as well. And likewise, that will also go forth and start building. Okay, so while that's happening, let's go through and set up a few other things on our project. Now, I'm going to do most of the things through the console. All of these tasks can also be done through either the Amplify CLI or the AWS CLI. So the first thing to do, let's go to our general tab. We're going to do a feature branch workflow. We don't want to keep manually connecting our feature branches to our backend in the same way that we just saw. Let's edit this and use a feature called branch auto detection. So what this is going to do is set up a webhook from our Git repo. So whenever there is a branch that's created using this pattern, feature / whatever it is, what we're going to do is we're going to create or connect that branch to a front end within Amplify console. And then optionally, we can create a brand new backend for every connected branch, or we can point all of those branches to an existing environment. And that's the option we're going to choose here. We're going to use the dev environment, branch auto detect access control. So we're going to enable this. And what this is going to do is just lock down those feature branches using a basic authentication scheme so that they're not public. The third option we're going to do here is set up a webhook such that when we do a PR and merge our feature branch back into our dev branch, we'll delete our feature branch. We no longer need it. We would like the Amplify console to also clean up those feature front-end environments as well. So let's save that, and we've got that set up. The next thing we want to do is set up domain management. So we want a custom URI. Out of the box, you're given these domain names and URLs to work with. They're already SSL, but they're not very friendly. So what we'll do is we'll use a domain that I've got hosted with AWS and Route 53, and we will set up both the production domain, and what we'll do is we'll set up a development domain as well. So we'll set that up. So now we're going to set the access control in a similar way we did for our feature branch detection. So we can do that on a per environment basis, new seafood, or we could actually set it up for the entire application. Now, I suggest if you're going to be, before you do your first release, you might want to protect your master branch as well so that the production version of your application is not publicly viewable until it is ready to be viewed, but we don't really care, so we're just going to leave that off now. So we can go back to our front-end environment and we can just double-check what that looks like, and that's deployed to that URL. If we look at our dev environment, you can see it's now prompting us for that basic auth that protects the environment from the public while we're developing. So in we go, and we can see we've got the same boilerplate application. Okay, so let's move over to our developer workflow now and see what that journey looks like for our developers. So we've got 2 developers on our team. One will be Jackie Jan. He'll be doing the authentication, and Chuck Norris, he'll be working on the AI and the predictions. So let's go over to Jackie's environment. So we're going to clone the project. So let's go and grab that. And Jackie's going to clone our project down onto his local environment. There we go. We'll see in and we'll spin up Visual Studio Code. Jackie's in. Master branch. Let's check out the dev branch. And so you can see from source code, we already have this Amplify folder, which is describing our Amplify assets in the backend configuration. And you can see we have these 2 environments, our dev and our prod. What we're going to do is create a feature branch, and Jackie's going to work out of that. Now, we'll use the convention that we set up with our auto detect. So we'll say feature auto, and we'll create that. Now, using the Amplify toolchain, we want to follow the same sorts of conventions we do with Git, right? So we've pulled the Git repo down. We've created the branch. What we need to do now is make sure that our backend is aligned. So the way we do that, we'll use Amplify Pull to bring down the target environment for this particular branch. So yes, we're going to use a profile, Amplify dev. What's the project we're working on? What environment are we going to target? We'll target the dev environment. Yes, we're using Visual Studio Code. It's a React app, and that's all we're going to do. Do we want to modify this backend? We're going to say yes. So what we're doing now is just setting up or bootstrapping our local environment to use that Amplify dev environment as the backend. All right, so now that we've done that, let's do an Amplify status to check the difference between our local environment and the cloud, which should be empty. And you can see that in that current environment of development, there are no resources deployed. So the first thing that Jackie's going to do is add authentication to our backend. So what we want to do is use the AWS Cognito authentication provider to provide sign in, sign up, and password reset. So we're going to accept the default configuration here. We're going to accept the defaults, nothing advanced. We don't want to use social identity providers such as Google or Facebook, etc. So let's now see what we've done. We do an Amplify status. All right, so locally, we've configured our authentication category with Amplify. That's just sitting locally. What we need to do is push that into our dev environment in order to work with that. So we're going to say Amplify push. The CLI is going to create a bunch of CloudFormation templates and then deploy that as a stack for that environment. So while it's doing that, let's switch over and do the front end piece of this feature now. So I'm just going to open up a new terminal there. And to begin working with Amplify in the front end, we're going to need to do a little bit of bootstrapping. So we need to add some node packages. So let's install those. So we only need to do this once. We do it at the root of our project. Let's bring those in. So here's AWS Amplify framework. Here is the configuration pieces. So this will be our per environment configuration file that the CLI creates for us locally here, but also during our CI/CD pipeline too. You can see there that the Cognito information for our dev environment is there. If we were building and targeting our production environment, this is the file that would get updated with those environment information, and our application would then pull that in at runtime. So that's those two pieces, and this is the piece that applies the configuration. The second piece that we've got here is related to the authentication category. So we're going to use a React component in here called with authenticator, which is a HOC component, which we'll use just to wrap our application so that our entry point is then going to enforce authentication using our Cognito authentication provider. So with those two pieces of changes made, let's test that now. All right, so as you can see, we now have to sign in to Cognito, or we can create an account and sign up through Cognito as well. You'll notice on the sign-ins, we also have support for reset password and those sorts of things. I'm not going to go through that right now, but our feature is working, so we're happy with our changes. Let's commit those changes. Added auth, and we'll push those changes up to repo. Now, what we should see, if everything worked okay, if we go back to our Amplify console, actually what we'll do is we'll just double check that we've got our feature auth here. Yep, cool. So that's in, that's just been pushed less than a minute ago. Let's go over to AWS console and let's see whether that auto detect has worked. So what we'll do is we'll just refresh. So let's go to here, front end environments, we've got our dev, and look, here you can see we've got our feature auth environment. Now that was the one that was auto detected and that has been set up. So it's now going through build and deploy, and you can see it's got its own endpoint there, as it should be using the dev backend environment. Normally we would see that here, as you can see here, continuous deployment set up with prod backend, set up with dev backend. We should see that there. So let's let that go through to completion. In the meantime, what we'll do is we'll go to that feature branch and we will say to the rest of the team, so we want to go dev, bang, so added auth, let's say, please review changes at this location. And what we'll do is we'll pop in our preview address. So we'll create the pull request. Great. And we'll just wait for that. Right, so let's go and go to our feature branch. So you can see that access control kicked in as well, because as part of our auto detection, we wanted to make sure that these environments were locked down so that the world didn't see them. So here's our application and we're off to check in. So I'm happy with that. So let's go back to the pull request and saying, looking good, Jackie. So I'm happy. Let's merge the pull request. Great. Pause there because we don't want to delete this branch just yet. We want to see what's going on in the backend, right? So we've made that pull request into the dev branch, remember? So let's go back to Amplify console. We'll go back to our environments. And already you can see that the integration between GitHub and our Amplify console has kicked off our CI/CD for the dev environment. Okay, so we'll let that run through to completion. What we'll do is we'll go back to our GitHub and we will now delete that branch. And if we go back to our console, again, I'll try this, but normally we just need to do a refresh. So I'll go back. There we go. So that webhook got processed, and you'll notice that our front-end environment for that feature branch has now been cleaned up as well. Meanwhile, Chuck has also been busy. So Chuck is our other developer. So remember, Jackie was working in front of us, if you like, or in parallel, but he actually got his change out while we're working on our feature. So what we want to do is make sure that, because we're going to need authentication, that locally we've told Amplify that of authentication has been deployed and is available to us already in that integration environment. Let's get working on our feature, which is prediction. So what we want to do is have a feature where we can upload an image, and that image is sent to our backend, where we're going to use AWS recognition to determine what are the objects it can see and identify within that image, so that we can work out exactly what type of food that is. All right, so let's go and add our predictions category to get started. We're going to choose the identify subcategory. We're going to choose labels. We'll accept the default. Who should have access? Authenticated users or guest users? We'll just go authenticated users. What we'll see now, if we go and amplify status, an operation of create, should we push this into the backend. We need to do one more thing before we can do this. We need to add some storage so that when users upload their image, we can keep that in a S3 bucket safely and securely. So we're going to do content. We're going to accept the friendly name, if you like, friendly bucket name, only authenticated users. Yes, they can create an update and they can read. Our application doesn't need to delete. Land trigger, nope. So that should be all good. So then doing an amplify status again. So let's have a look at that. And we've got storage is creating as well. Okay, so let's push that into our dev environment. There we go. So amplify push. And while that's happening, we will go and do the front end component of this feature. All right, do we want to continue? Yes. And off it goes. Okay, so let's now go and do the front end pieces. So we're going to bring in the storage and the predictions libraries from the AWS framework. So what I've done is just pasted in that sample code. So you can see here, the first thing we do is we go and store that image that's been selected up into S3 bucket. And that's all we need to do because the Amplify framework provides those libraries for us to make it nice and easy. So if that's successful, then what we'll do is we'll go and call our predictions API to help identify the labels within that source file. And that will then return us an array, if you like, of all the things that are identified within that particular image. And then what we do is we look for a hot dog. If we found a hot dog, all is great. We'll set our state down here, and we've also got some processing state as well. We'll go and fetch that image that we stored in S3, and then we'll view that within our application. So that's very quickly what the feature does. Now just our app and see if it works as we predicted. Okay, so here's our sign up. So we did this before in our development environment, so we should have our user already provisioned. So let's go in there and sign in. So after we log in, you can see here the file upload element for uploading an image. Let's do that. Let's do a positive test. Yay, hot dog. Let's do a negative test. Not hot dog, exactly. So very good. Our application is working as we expected. Let's just do a couple of edge cases. So here we've got a Lego hot dog, obviously not hot dog, very well, very good. Backend AI service. Here's something that might trip it up. Yeah, I tend to agree that is definitely a hot dog. All right, okay, so our application is working as we expected. So let's now push those changes. Great. Push our feature up to the cloud, well, up to our GitHub. And let's have a look here. Let's go and create a pull request. Into dev. Here's our feature. Added recognition. Well, let's go image recognition, not to be confused with the service name. Yep. Please review at this link. Okay, so let's go and grab that link from our Amplify console. So we go here, dev. Here's our feature branch that has been picked up. You'll notice it's going through a build at the moment because we've committed those changes. So let's go into here. At that, we will create a pull request. Great. So what we'll do now is we'll just wait for that build to complete. All right. So as you can see, we have a complete deployment. So if I was to go to test this, again, we get challenged, which is good. Cool. So again, we're using a shared dev background. So as I tested locally, this should be the same user pool. So we should be able to sign in without any troubles. We won't need to create a new account. And there we go. We've got our app. We've got our new feature, and we will test that out. Everything works fine. Deployment, yes, pasta is not a hot dog, so that's all good. But notice that also, even though we're using the same backend environment, if we were to go to our dev version, so the version of our app that's currently deployed into our dev front end, we have authentication because that's what Jackie set up for us. It's using the same user pool as we have in our other one. I did get it right. but you'll notice it is a completely different version of the app, right? So even though it's using the same backend, we've been using the feature branch Git workflow in order to handle our multi-developer team environment. Okay, that's all looking good. Looks great, Chuck. You don't want to upset Chuck for obvious reasons. All right, so pull request merged and closed. Let's delete the branch. We're finished with that. And like we saw before, the pull request and merge has been completed. So our dev build picks up. So now that's going to go forth and deploy our changes into the dev environment. And this environment should disappear as well once that webhook is received. Let's do a refresh. Front-end environment, and you can see, yep, our webhook has been received and that front-end environment has been removed. If we ever want to double check that or actually troubleshoot that, I found that if we go into the settings, we can go down to webhooks. And when actually hit the edit button here, we can see a history of the webhooks that get fired off to our Amplify console. So in particular, here is the webhook that told us that the feature branch had been removed. If it doesn't work, and I have had to do this in the past, is sometimes I've had to shoot off that webhook event again. So just keep that in mind as well. Cool, so that's going through. Dev branch is being deployed. Everything looks all right. With our feature development complete, the last step is to promote our changes into production. Because we have the Amplify console providing our managed CI/CD, that is just a matter of us doing a PR from dev into master and reviewing that as a team. Prod release v1. Off we go. Cool, cool. Everyone agree? Yes. Let's confirm. Alrighty. So we've got that. What we should see now, and I've got our change now being pushed into our production environment. What we'll see is that the authentication category and the file storage category will now get deployed into our production environment, along with our front-end React application as well. So setting up the hosting, the CDN, we already have SSL set up as part of that initial step that we made, but our CDN will get, the cache will get invalidated and that will become live. So let's just wait for that to go through. Should the build fail for any reason, the Amplify console also provides us with atomic deployments. So we can go back and redeploy a previous version at any time and roll back that particular change. If we were to come in and look at the progress of our build, we can go to this section here. We can see the backend is currently being deployed. You can see the CloudFormation templates getting executed so that our resources are provisioned in our production environment. So now we're up to the deployment stage, which is our front-end React application that's being deployed to our S3 static hosting, and the CDN being invalidated is just completed. So what we can do now is go to our master, fire it up, and here we get challenged with our authentication, which is one of our new features. You'll notice it is a completely separate environment. So the user that I have been using through the test or integration environment is it's not the same user pool as the production environment, obviously. So it's a completely different instance. So we would have to go through creating an account and setting all that up, which I won't go through again. Just to know that, yes, the master has been deployed. So in this demo, we've seen how we can set up our application for multi-team developer access. We can implement a Git flow feature branch workflow using the Amplify toolchain, and how we can set up our Amplify project to be production ready with domain certificates, with authentication, integration with our GitHub accounts, so that we can be creating these environments on the fly dynamically as our team picks up features and develops features throughout the application lifecycle.
Okay, to wrap up, so we've got some resources there to go off and have a look. Amplify docs, the Amplify community is very, very active. There's also a Discord channel as well to jump on and join the conversation. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy your day.